we'll move on to the next part, which is number 2, our update on our Budget Advisory Committee. Commissioner Drexler, would you lead us off on that?
I'd be happy to. So Budget Advisory Committee was selected, include Tamara Ing.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, I just got reminded of something. If everybody's okay, so we need to move somebody up forward so she can do her thing. And,
Oh, now I have guilt.
and yeah, you should have guilt. My apologies. I just got reminded just now. With everybody's permission, we're going to move forward. Item number 4, and we are going to invite Christina Sanders to speak. She is from WSU in regards to our strategic planning partnership.
You want me to go ahead, or did you have stuff you wanted to say about the strategic plan
Actually,
first?
wanted to introduce Christina. She's here with, from WSU Extension to help us facilitate the strategic plan. The one thing, or a couple of things that I wanted to identify up front was A, are we still on track to do a strategic plan for this year? I'm assuming everybody is still looking to get to a strategic plan process this year. Sounds like everybody's still on board.
Well, let's put it in a different manner. Is there anybody has any issue with us continuing to move forward? Even if it's not done for this year, at least we're starting the process, get a strategic plan going. Does anybody have heartburn with us continuing to do that for the year?
And then can I have a raise of those that, hands?
There's no raises in this county at all, I'm sorry.
A raise of hands of those that would like to participate in the planning team. That would be the team that puts the process together at the beginning.
Lisa Frazier raised her hand also.
Perfect.
I think Commissioner Schutte was interested, so that's why I'm not, and we'll hold off with this commission.
So I'll take those names and then we'll start the process of putting your committee together. Christina?
All right, so as I said, my name is Christina Sanders. I am currently the director of the Division of Governmental Studies and Services at Washington State University, which is one of the research, what we call research and outreach centers that Extension has. I also am the director of WSU's Emergency Management Office, so forgive me if I pay attention to my phone because the person who usually is on call for all of WSU is currently vacationing in Europe somewhere, and I'm insanely jealous, but so if I get distracted by my phone, that's why. So I just wanted to come today basically to introduce myself and talk a little bit about what our unit does at WSU. We've been around for a little over 50 years. I haven't been there that whole time. But so I said we do research and outreach. We have lots of experience doing different kinds of survey research, lots with law enforcement agencies on the state level and with Washington State Patrol and Montana State Patrol, and then lots with local law enforcement agencies. Lots of community feedback assessments and employee feedback assessments. We've done some of those on a bigger scale with Oregon Department of Transportation and what was the other one that we did that I sent to?
Whitman County.
Whitman County. So we worked with Whitman County on their planning process a few years back as well. We also do a fair amount of facilitation work, which is probably my favorite part because I like kind of getting people together and helping them work through a process or a problem or a policy evaluation or modification or whatever. So some of the facilitation projects that we've worked on recently include the Voluntary Stewardship program. Are most of you familiar with what that is, right, as county folks? So Thurston County and Chelan County were two of the counties that did that piloted the VSP programs in Washington. So I lived in Olympia for 8 years until 2 years ago, and then I moved back over to Pullman, which has been a bit of a change. There is no shopping in Pullman, by the way, people. Thurston County contracted with our unit to put together a stakeholder group to facilitate the voluntary stewardship planning process for Thurston County. It was quite an interesting group of folks who literally, it felt like, came to the table with their baggage in hand, lots of trust issues and ongoing burns from litigation, and so it was a learning process. I facilitated meetings with them for probably a little over a year and a half, and managed to help get them to a point where they were actually the first county in Washington to get their VSP plan approved. So that's one of the more fun and groups that require a lot of effort for public facilitation process. We've also done lots of facilitation that has to do with just other issues in communities, non-native invasive fish species where they have to come in and do eradication and suppression, and community members need to have a better understanding of, you know, how that's going to work for them in their communities. So that's, when I've done some over here when we had issues on Bud Bay. I don't know if you were involved with that Bud Bay Inlet.
Yeah.
When they were, when there was issues with folks hunting out on the water and the landowners in the area. So I facilitated some of the public meetings surrounding that situation as well. And when our Murrow Department of Communication transitioned into a college, we helped them do those public processes, helped them to transition, and did some with the Tri-Cities when they were working on their functional consolidation of services. So we have a fair amount of experience doing different kinds of facilitation public process meetings. I met with Kevin Schutte probably a month ago, I would say, and we sat and chatted a little bit about some of the things that you all have going on in the county, some of the challenges, and about helping you folks get started on planning, on doing a strategic plan. I don't know how many of you know Mike Gaffney, he is currently the director for Extension right now. He's the acting director. He would tell you the emphasis is on acting. But he's doing a great job, and he actually planned on being here for the meeting. He's here in Shelton, but ended up being over at our Extension office dealing with some kerfuffle that came up in Pullman. Point is that he is really committed to this. He has already talked to folks at the county and said that he is willing to support this moving forward. When Kevin and I talked, we talked about the possibility of maybe doing an employee assessment survey to try to get a feel for sort of what county employees are thinking, what the strengths are, what people love about being here, and some of the gaps and what they don't love, to try to help this group get an idea on how to move forward. I think that would be really an informative tool for determining next steps in the process. So that's about all I have. I just kind of wanted to tell you a little bit about what we do in my personal and my unit's experience. We engage students in research that we do, which is great because they're really eager and have all kinds of brand new research techniques that they love to try out. I think one of the real benefits of working with our unit and with the university in general in doing this kind of research is that it's not always easy to get candid responses from, especially from employees, but just people in general, on processes like this or in responding to a survey necessarily, especially if people perceive that there's some sort of threat or risk to their job. So one of the advantages I think in having us do this is that we can do a confidential survey where we only have probably 3 people who would see anybody's responses. We can set it up so it's completely confidential. Responses go directly to our secured server that only our unit has. So because we can do that, it's, I'm not going to say it's easy because nobody loves taking surveys, but it adds an extra layer of confidence, I think, in folks who are responding to surveys, that they know that it's not, you know, the county administration asking county employees how they feel about the county administration. So, and that way, you know, if you can get more honest responses from folks, you can kind of get a better feel on what's happening and maybe how to move forward in a process that's going to be successful. So,
Does anybody have any questions?
I think it's a great idea. I worked with Mike and Christina on several things, statewide issues, the Sheriff's Association, and there were some also things out of Thurston County, but I've been the biggest advocate since I've been here for 12 years of developing a strategic plan, which we haven't done. And I would tell you, it's high time, long past time to have done this. And the people that have done this, it makes a whole lot of difference. And the county knows what direction it's moving and has a direction it's going to go. it has a lot better chance to get there. If you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. And I can tell you that some of them that Mike had done some presentations on of the research projects that they've done through Washington State, they're done really, really well. I've seen them brought back with the information presented to groups. I can tell that Mike is very persistent on those studies to make sure you get things filled out and in them so they have a good representation. And I think that the other organizations that have used them have been very happy with your work. And the State Sheriff's Association, Police Chiefs Association, very happy with it.
Okay.
I have one. I mean, you said that you did some planning with Whitney County, and I was hoping to hear a little bit about that. One of the things it seems like the work you've done was people were focused on one particular goal.
It depends, not necessarily. I mean, sometimes we've helped people work through a process that's a little bit more exploratory in helping, like with Whitman County, it was, I think probably pretty similar to where you guys are. And you have the set of questions that I forwarded, right?
Mhm.
We actually did interviews in Whitman County instead of doing an online email survey. But basically it was to help them, like I said for you guys, to kind of better understand, because they had a perception that there was a lot of negativity. I don't want to tell too much of their business over here, but they had a perception that there was a lot of negativity and people were siloed in their departments, and they were dealing with a lot of budget issues. And what they found out in response to the survey partly was that people weren't nearly as negative about the things that they thought they had been. So it helped them figure out, like I said, what were their strengths and what they could kind of build on. They started doing some cross-training a little bit, so folks weren't quite as siloed and felt like they could maybe rely on each other a little bit more, get a little bit, sort of community building between departments a bit. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, the actual question was going to be, it sounds like what you were doing was a little bit of team building with women.
Partly, yes.
As opposed to
Partly that was
strategic
one of the
planning.
gaps, sort of, in what they found. And they ended up moving forward in developing a strategic plan that they didn't actually continue to work with us on. They found out kind of really specific needs from their survey assessment and ended up not needing us moving forward for a lot. And that would, if that ends up happening with you guys, then so be it. I mean, we want to be able to help you get to where you want to be. If you figure out from doing an assessment that you've got some directions to go and you don't need us for that, then that's fine. We just want to help you get on your feet and be able to move forward and do it. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
No
you
other
coming down.
questions? That was easy.
Yeah, thank you.
Christina, thank you so much.
Yep, you bet.
All right, we're gonna go ahead, Commissioner Drexler, sorry to have interrupted you on that.
Yeah, I can.
So we did appoint, let's see, we appointed 6 people, but one person dropped out after appointment. I think we have, let's see, we have Tamara Englandson, who used to run the United Way here in Mason County. She's still involved with United Way, and I asked each of them in the first meeting to share what they think they bring to the table as far as skill set. And she felt like what she brought to the table was an eye on the people and the social service side of things, the social needs of Mason County. James Sims, who used to be our Planning Advisory Committee chair, and he also managed a investment fund of monies that were paid by folks who have underground fuel storage, and so it was more of a risk insurance in case any of those needed a leak, but he managed that fund. And so he has experience both with budgeting for his department of the state as well as investments. Cheryl Williams, who is a tax accountant, and so she understands taxation policies and has been a very avid student of Mason County's budget processes. A woman named Astrid, I'm going to get it wrong, Astrid Pearson, who also comes from state government in a budgetary role. I believe it was Department of Health was her department that she worked in. And then she also does some nonprofit treasurer work. And then Jeff Carey, who I think brings to the table, in his opinion, or in his words, was inventory control. And he says, I see money as nothing more than inventory. but he's also very active in the community, in the nonprofit sector in the North End. And so we have folks with some budget experience in the private or public sector, which I think is helpful. Our first meeting, we went through, some of the review, the bylaws, the resolution, what they were here for, what the OPMA says. But then we also had a good bit of data dump to them, which was a history of 10-year history of revenues and expenditures, a really good education about our property tax, how property taxes are, how the assessment value is made, and then and correlates to the levy, and then the 1% increase limitation. One of your pro forma property tax bills was reviewed, and all of that education was a real eye-opener. I think very few of them really understood our property tax system, which I think is kind of indicative of the public in general. Had a good look at our property tax levy rate compared to all the counties in the state, and that was another eye-opener. And just the oddity that Mesa County is one of the only counties that has a higher road levy than one of four counties.
4 or 5, I think, now. But
levy than a current expense one, and just the limitations around that. And then went through our budget process, mandated by the RCWs and the timelines, and explained a little bit about how we do the budget process. And then did a little bit of the salary, showed the 2015 salary comparison charts that we had produced when we were looking at, see if we could take care of some of the salary lag we had, so they have a feel for where Mason County employees fall in compared to our comparable counties. We had a lot of discussion about who our comparable counties are, and we have a good understanding of that, and a good understanding of how our comparable counties are not necessarily our market competitors, such as Thurston and Kitsap County, and then you could go and look at those numbers and how they're drastically different, how we can never really compete with those folks on a revenue basis. And then wanted to ask them, what kind of more information do you want? They gave us that information, but they really wanted to dig right into a meeting with the elected officials and department heads to hear about your mandates and your revenue streams that are outside of the current expense revenue, and then just information about your budget. And so we went ahead, and Diane has contacted all of you, and hopefully you've gotten it, create a schedule for everybody to come present to the Budget Advisory Committee. And our next meeting is June 6th. We try to keep on our agendas or in front of them always their tasks. And so as much as I wanted to prioritize their tasks for them and our workload, they really wanted to hear from you all first. So that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And so after they've gotten all this data, then they can get down to their tasks. So we'll just keep that on the agenda so they always have that in front of them. And if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Go ahead.
Last year, you required all of them to have narratives, and I think if we all put a lot of effort into those narratives, perhaps they could get a copy of those prior to.
And that's exactly what we did. Okay. So our first meeting, all the budget narratives went out to them as well.
Just to,
so they have all that information.
Short period of time to.
Yeah. So the hope is. The hope is that you would come to, what they want to know is what are your mandates? The narrative talks about the goals and the accomplishments, and I think that'll be very helpful. And how do you measure, your, and my hope is that they see how you measure your workload needs. And that helps kind of talk about the mandate as well. But they want to know your mandates, they want to know any revenue sources you bring in, because I think they're always going to keep their eye open on what types of revenue sources they might be able to be tapped for augmenting the revenues of the county. And was there another Frank, is there something else there?
I think you covered it all, yeah.
But yeah, we will be sending them everything that you've sent us as far as narrative this past year. If you want to highlight anything in particular that wasn't in your last year's narrative, please do so. Please send it.
Commissioner, how are they gonna set up the interviews with the electeds?
They already have
They will
those
come in and present.
The schedule, you
Yeah,
already?
Diane sent it out.
Okay, good. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Commissioner. Next, we're gonna move up to our review of the 2019 budget process. Frank?
It's that time of year again. July 9th, the auditor will send out the call for the budget. August 13th, preliminary budgets are due back to the auditor.
August what?
August 13th. September 4th, the preliminary budgets are due from the auditor back to the county. And by December 31st, hope to have an adopted budget. The first adopted budget date would be October 1st. Some year maybe we'll get there and adopt a budget in the first round of allowable budget adoption dates. But December 31st. So the big dates are July 9th is the call for the budget. August 13th is the preliminaries are due back. September 4th, the preliminaries are presented to the board after auditor's review. And then December 31st is an adopted budget.
How do those dates fit in with the Budget Advisory Committee?
They don't. There's, they don't necessarily correlate in the sense that one is going to drive the other.
Right.
At least this year. As that committee matures and continues into next year, the hope is that it will.
However, they do have in their, the resolution was the hope to have some recommendations to the commission by August.
By August.
And I don't recall the date, but
Okay.
by a date.
Okay.
So, where they
I
get.
think it was the end of August, wasn't it?
Because there would be some discussion points, I'd imagine, after the citizen advisory group does all that work with the various departments.
If they can get it done in time
Yeah.
for that, because
Something right there.
we're asking them to take on a lot, and look at a lot.
Or something.
Yeah. My thought is that they
Yeah.
will not hit that
Yeah.
deadline.
These deadlines are,
And
There's not flexibility.
they will continue on. But I suspect that once they've got all the information, it depends on how, you know, how hard they work about putting out some recommendations that could potentially be, you know, available to us by October.
And as our
We're gonna
coroner,
meet twice a month, by the way.
Okay.
as our coroner just pointed out, what Frank was mentioning is the dates by law.
Right.
so one of the other changes is the way that we would hope to pull the budget together. So Thurston County and Kitsap County use a process, or similar process, which is to do a base budget and then request policy level requests, or PLRs. So as a base budget, the 2018 budget would be put into budget level 1 for the development of the 2019 budget. Budget level 2 would then have policy level requests, which are project by project adds to the 2018 adopted budget. Some of those are departmental, some of them may be programmatic or program within the department. Some of those project level requests might be across a number of departments. For instance, if pretrial services comes together, that will be a PLR that is clerk-driven, courts-driven, public defenders-driven, prosecutor-driven, so there may be dollars involved in that from a number of different departments. But then the third level budget would be the auditor's review of your budgets and submit a preliminary budget based on the third level. The fourth level budget would be the board's reviews and modifications of those. And then the fifth level, which is the final budget, would then be what would be proposed as the adopted budget. Documents and instructions for staff will be presented along with the guidelines. The support services accounting or financial services team would be working with each of the departments and elected offices to collaborate in putting together the salaries and benefits budgets for each of the departments and electeds, so that staffing levels, L&I, medical insurance, DRS, and all of those types of costs are vetted prior to preliminary. And once preliminary is done, there is no need then to go further with staffing, except for adjustments that are requested for in the PLRs. As part of the preliminary audit budget, the auditing department and the financial services department will be going through and working with each of your departments to validate and adjust your budgets from an auditing perspective, do the transfers in and out balance, do revenues balance, things of that nature. So the two departments will be working together to work with your departments to get to salaries and benefits, as well as understanding what the PLR impacts are to the budget process. That's basically at this level, at this point, all I have. Those are the specific dates, and then just in general what the process would look like.
So prelims are due the 13th, but the Illinois and all those rates don't come out till September, October, right?
Correct. Crystal ball time. So we'll estimate what there'll be, if there's going to be any increases. And that's why Support Services wants to work with each of the departments in developing those salary adjustments, because the number's not going to be correct when we submit the July guidelines. There's going to need to be an adjustment. And those adjustments coming from one area, controlled by, which would generally be just a very large spreadsheet, can be made very quickly by changing the one parameter for, let's say, L&I or for DRS, rather than working each department independently. That doesn't always come back with the correct information.
I have a couple questions for you. One, I assume we've looked into it. We've had questions in the past about the legalities of the way things are done. Since this is done in both of those counties, I'm sure we've double checked to make sure it's compatible with the law.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the other one is, we talked about how to add a program, but some of these organizations that are getting grants and stuff may be ending programs. So they shouldn't move forward after the year, into 19, for example. Do we have, obviously I'm looking, you don't have a mechanism yet. Okay.
No,
Might want to look at a
point.
mechanism to figure that out, because some of these that are getting grants that are not going to get grants, we need to be able to show that on the bottom line.
We already do that.
I'm talking for his budget, for others, if we're setting it up based on the 2018, as he said, he may not even be looking at that. You will. But
Yeah, you will.
But he won't. We need to make sure that we look at it from both ends, that he's seeing it as well. Other
Any questions?
Go ahead, Peter, you're thinking one.
No.
Okay. All right.
Frank, I know, what's our budget forecast for right now, as best you got to read on it, where are we?
We had a conversation this morning, and what did we say? We were, this year, we were at 350?
Well, and it depends. If we are to adopt the supplemental, basically as we put forward, we could be as far as $500,000 backwards by the end of the year.
This year.
Yeah, for next year to start up. But it's most likely, we're looking at a couple $100,000 on the best case scenario right now. But that's not taking into account full amount that we think we're getting for the sales tax and putting that into the future. There's a few things that can be tweaked to look at it, but being conservative, it looks like if this passes, we're several $100,000 backwards before the year starts. If that supplemental passes the way it's in.
For clarity, by backwards, you mean in the hole?
From status quo, yes. You know, well, you gotta
Our-
remember.
our direction
No,
has been
no,
downwards,
But,
so-
but you gotta remember, this is actually, I should clear that up. It's actually a little better than that, because this is, that couple $100,000 backwards is including, the $750,000,
Projection for salary.
For salaries and stuff.
I was just gonna ask
and
that.
accepting that in. So we're actually better than it sounds, you know.
That's already included, but.
Yes, that's
or
included.
Estimated.
If that's included, and then there's some contracts that may bring that down. That's why I said, right now, best case scenario, according to what we did this morning, we're looking at a couple $100,000 difference. But that may be, hopefully, we're all praying that that's not the issue. We figure it out. Other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and, we're looking at updates from elected officials and directors. Who would like to start? Would you please?
Let's see, we're implementing a new ballot processing center system, and we are currently having training around the clock. Tomorrow, they start installing the system, and we're trying to keep 1 foot in front of our deadlines. Less than 3 weeks, our military ballots are being sent out, so we're trying not to panic. So, because we're implementing this system for the primary in a short period of time. Last week, I got notice that our Mountain View, the owner of Mountain View Licensing, will be retiring at the end of the summer. So that will require us to replace that sub-agent. It's an open competitive bid process, so we'll be soliciting applications and interviewing for a new sub-agent.
So they're closing the
Yay.
shop? They're closing the shop.
They're retiring, yes, and a sub-agent is a little different than, you don't really own your business, so they just have to walk away. So it is kind of like replacing it, but it's a new sub-agent. They can have a new location, so it's kind of like a new business, yeah. So we should probably start that in the middle of the summer. Looking for a business? It's a good business.
Thank you. Dave?
On the DCD side, it never slowed down this winter. So in fact, month over this year, last year, or this time last year, at least another 100 people per month at the front counter. So we're running between 550 and 650 people at the front counter every month. That's just in the community development side, not including public health. So each one of those figure an hour per person at the front counter. We are implementing SmartGov, so that process is going forward. We're in the process right now of getting all the workflows into the system, and then in the rest of June and July, we'll be exporting our data from Tidemark over into that. August and September, we're going to run the two simultaneously, make sure they're spitting out the same answers to everybody, and then go live this fall. So we'll be seeing online permitting in hopefully early fall.
Tomorrow, we're going to come in and announce the bids we just opened for the Matlock-Brady Road. Rockledge was low, and they're anxious to get started. We'd like to have the pre-con next week and get them going. The week after next, last week in June, we're going to get a jump start on the BST program around the county. This year, I think we're doing 52 miles, so that's almost twice as much the BST as we normally do. And also going to be concurrently doing some road striping too with that. So that's about the high spot.
We just finished up our physical inspections on time, which is really nice. We are currently doing the analysis and getting everything ready to go into the new change of values that should go out sometime probably mid-August. And the appraisers are going out and picking up new construction, which I hope there's a lot of.
Us too.
I see it everywhere, so I'm hoping for big numbers this year.
We continue to tread water, which is about as well as we can hope for. We did, we've seen in some of the moves that the jail has made has changed a lot of the nature of the cases we have coming in. We're seeing a large increase in sex offense cases. And so I think, the hashtag #MeToo thing has hit Mason County as well. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we're seeing an increase in reports of sex offenses, not an increase in sex offenses being committed. I guess I'll let the sheriff speak to that, but it is producing something of a strain on my end of things, because defending a sex offense is much more complicated than defending a simple possession case. And we're doing less simple possessions and more sex offenses now.
Well, the treasurer's office isn't even treading water. We're underwater, drowning up there. I have a staff out on family leave. I don't know when she'll be able to return. So now I'm down 3 full-time employees, and we are struggling to keep our daily work caught up. And we're still struggling to catch up from after tax time with all of the work that's out there and waited to be done. So for a property tax refund or property tax correction, we're estimating 3 months out before we will be able to provide refund checks to taxpayers and so forth. So I'm spending lots of time answering the phones and working at the counter, and we really need some help. But we're there Monday through Friday, open the public 9 to 4, and we'll keep trudging. But we are really struggling.
It's a hard one to follow.
I'm sorry, but it's a struggle up there.
So for youth development, summer programs are kicking off. 4 weeks of summer day camps down here in Shelton coming up. Those are almost full, by the way. So if you have any youth that you know of, get them in signed up right away. Summer camp is almost full as well. Horse camp is coming up. We have volunteer trainings coming up as well as team leadership training. So our summer is packed. On the professional development side, the Early Learning Coalition of Mason County, which I'm a huge part of, is hosting a trauma-informed care professional development right here in Shelton. Over 250 people will be attending that. It's free to the public. It's focused on early learning, but it's applicable to anyone that you serve. Mason County is one of the highest ACEs scores places in Washington State. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So I'd recommend, if you're interested in this training, let me know. It's free, and you just sign up on the Google Form document. So, we hosted a celebratory early learning event a few weeks ago at the Colonial House, where we honored the hospital system here as well as the library system for their advancing of early learning support services for families and children in Mason County. So it was a good opportunity to showcase what's happening here in Mason collectively as a coalition focused on youth and families. Over the weekend, we had, so the Master Gardener program had a slight vandalism case up at Catalyst Park. They decided to weed a lot of the flower beds and all the flowers out of the beds, and some of the ones outside the fenced-in area. So we did a police report, but there's not much you can do. The flowers have been destroyed. So yeah, it's a busy time for us. Happy to have Mike Gaffney and DGSS, Christina, working with us, and Mike is the Extension Director as well as past Director of that office, so he's well aware of Extension and Mason County.
Thank you. Sheriff?
Nice meeting the other day that we attended with you on early learning.
Thank you.
I think it's very apparent by his numbers as to where our numbers are derived to. When you're a county in the state of Washington that's got that high in numbers, you're not leading the way.
Yep.
Your chances of children growing up to be involved in criminal activity is much, much higher.
Yep.
So when we can start to reduce that through those preventative things, I think that will help us in the long run. So I appreciate your work there. Also, as many of you know, that the biggest area across the nation right now, or maybe aside from the opioid epidemic, is the issues with mental health. We started off a few years ago making every effort that we could to make the 8-hour basic mental health training standards for all of our officers in our department, deputies in our department. We had accomplished that, and we've moved forward to go to the critical incidents training at 40-hour, and we've completed the cycles of those through our office now. And that's where it's at in the community to avoid liability and those things, is learning and understanding how to deal with people with different types of circumstances regarding mental health. So that's been a big thing for us. You mentioned sex offender cases, and there's another one that we talked this morning about WASPIC numbers. I want to bring this up again. I appreciate your comments there, because I had taken a look at the WASPIC numbers. I look at them all the time. And oftentimes the numbers that come out through the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs are coded in a little bit differently than what we put them out, because they don't always fit the category statewide. Mason County doesn't fit what everybody else is doing. So interesting.
And I was pulling my numbers off the
right,
courts.
But interestingly enough, pointing that out, I looked at those, and our numbers didn't seem to be matching what I'm seeing in the newspaper and the amount of convictions and cases that are going through. And I called and asked about that. It's because they're coding some of our cases in differently by the way they go in. So we have an extremely high amount of cases that are being bumped in through the court system of sexual assault cases. I talked to our detectives on that. Says no, we are not down in numbers. We're up, and they're extremely tough cases. And again, we stem back to what you're talking about, is overall the health of our county and what we're doing with our youth. And
I'm only looking at cases after they're filed.
Right.
You're looking at all the pre-filing stuff.
right,
as
but
well.
there's a lot of stuff coming in, and so it's not making your life any easier. And,
No.
and I think the work that you're doing, I really believe this in other places where I've worked, that the work that you do at the lower levels through early learning and those kind of things will make a difference in the long run in our county. And that's a good focus. It was a great program the other day. That's it.
I've got a couple, just a few things. Parking lot across from the sheriff's office is moving along. We're hoping to have that done before the end of this month, and open and inspected and passed for use. Trees are going in today, I believe, and they're going to regrade. And then when the city comes through with the sewer project, they're going to put a culvert right near the middle of the parking area to catch the storm drain water runoff. And that will be the final aspect of that project. But that should be open before the end of this month in anticipation of the Alder Street project. That project is still continuing. They haven't started breaking ground, although they're breaking everybody else's ground around. But that's for the sewer project. Alder Street is a different project. And that will, the expectation is that will start sometime next month or the month following, and then run into the fall. IT had an update to their phone system this last week. They're working on the issue in which somebody who dials in and attempts to use the phone tree to get to an extension, in some cases never gets to that extension. That's about 2/3 of the time. The issue is it depends on which trunk line it comes in on. And they haven't been able to pinpoint exactly what the problem is. But basically the problem is that the computer doesn't listen for the first tone. So if you put in 560, all it hears is 60, and it doesn't know what that is. So it shoots it off into Never Never Land. So they did an update this last week, and they're very close to getting that resolved. IT is also working on, commissioners don't know about this yet, but they're working on putting Microsoft 360 together for next year as an opportunity for us to move into a completely updated computer model for everybody throughout the county. I say everybody should change me. So that's what IT is working on. RISC has implemented the Core 360 training. Actually, there's a pretty good response to that. Most people have been taking the training, but I encourage you all to make sure that your staff and associates are doing the training. It's to help the county increase the level of risk assessment throughout all of the employees, so that all of the employees are aware of the liabilities the county might incur in their actions that currently they may have no concept of. So that's what the purpose of the 360 training is.
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, yes.
We can't see whether or not people are taking the training. Is there some follow-up with the departments so that we know whether or not our personnel are taking it? You're saying you're encouraging us to make sure, but we can't make sure, we can't see.
There's supposed to be a report that comes out at the end of the month.
Okay, I have.
That gives you the details of who's taken what and whom. I will follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Also, on that, Frank, we were asked to do it by a certain date, and a number of us tried to get in, and then we got a message back that said, sorry, you can't get in.
That's been resolved.
But nobody ever come back and said it's been resolved, so I don't know where.
Yeah, she did.
There was an email.
There was another email, once it was
Okay,
resolved.
because I tried a couple times.
Mason County had such a heavy response, blew up their system. And for about 2 weeks, it was offline. So it's been
I
fixed.
probably made the request in the same 2 weeks. I did it twice, and I got back, it wasn't ready yet, so both times.
Is there a reason why there's a time limit on these? Because it's putting my staff in kind of a panic. Because they don't have a, recording license, they don't have their computer. We have to take them offline, we have to, shut down their cash drawer, we have to go back in the back.
Work with you.
And they
There's
said-
no reason for a time limit other than
But they all got
to
them. I
have a
was
reason
wondering.
for a time limit.
Yeah.
So there isn't anything specific to that period. But I think we can talk and work through
When I spoke to Nicole about it, because obviously it's not a high priority for my office, we have things that have to be done. So they are aware next door that even though there are deadlines and due dates on there, we will not be meeting them, so.
Have to pay overtime to do it, to get it done outside.
Yeah.
Is there any input we can have on which trainings we see? 'Cause
the next cycle, yes.
okay, 'cause we just got assigned the heavy lifting, and we're all office jockeys.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
In the next cycle, there will be a number, I think there's 1,000 or some huge number of programs that are available. We'll go to each of the departments to find out, and it may be available to the department in a specialized fashion, rather than just generally basic training across all departments.
I'll take your heavy lifting.
For instance.
Use that one.
There's always humor in it.
So Frank, while we're on that same vein, can we talk about the badge policy? Because we've been trying to meet that policy and get badges for everyone. But in order to do that, they have to have the emergency management training. And we have no time to take that training. None, zero.
That is a
So I
pretty
have staff with no
substantial-
badges because there is not enough hours for us to take.
It's not a 20-minute.
No.
No, it isn't, so
And I
Exactly.
understand that you're using a process through the emergency management department, but the county, if you're gonna require badges, you're gonna have to require something that we can all meet and exist in, because it's just not gonna work for us.
Okay, let me circle back with the commission on how we can make modifications to the badge policy and possibly modify that. Because the equipment comes from DEM, and as a function of the equipment and the process, it requires that training
That's
be
right, but
done.
you're requiring us to
And-
have badges, which means we're required to have that training.
And we're supposed to have that training anyway. Everybody in the county is at some point supposed to get that training. So I could circle back with the commission and look at
Yeah, I guess
how.
I could close the office down for a day, sure.
how long does it take to take that training? Who's taken it lately?
They're,
Takes a few hours.
Part of my judges,
it's a few hours.
Yeah.
one of the things, back when, in the day, when we went up to another building to take that, and how many years ago was that? We went up, I did all the training, I did all the tests, I passed it all, but at the very end of it, it says, we want your social security number, we want this, we want that, we want the other thing. And my judge said, absolutely not, you will not give them your social security number. Therefore, all that work I did to take it, pass it, there's no record of it. And now I'm gonna have to do it again, and I'm still being told by my judge that I'm not to give out my social security number.
Why would they have
Social
that?
Security is
I
required.
usually ask for the last
I remember
four.
that's been a while.
I don't think that's required any longer. I know by law you're not
But now
allowed
you're
to give
still
out
over.
your social security for that type of a circumstance. So I'm not sure that's the case, that you're required
At
for
the
social
beginning,
security.
it does say your social security number and such is still required. Whether you get to the end and it only wants the last four, I don't know.
Frank, are you gonna continue to monitor? I've seen this before where you go into a system like this, like the 360 system, and the requirement for the training in the county gets to be more and more and more. We've had to do this in the sheriff's office for years, and then we get, the blowback about what it costs for overtime. If she's in that same boat, it can get to the point where it's really simple for the county to say, we're gonna give you all this training, it's required for you to take it, but to say when. If you don't, then either you gotta shut down the office, you've gotta pay overtime, you've gotta pay something. At a certain point, it's not as saving as cost effective as you might think it is, because you can't tell people you gotta come in and work your 8-hour day, plus you gotta take 3 hours of training here and then another 2 hours of training there, and you're really not paying them for that time.
Frank, is that training required by state law or county code, or county regulation?
The Core 360 county. The badge policy.
What are they gonna pay for it?
No, that part I understand already,
Yeah.
that's different.
But much of that Core 360 training is stuff that is actually required by WAC and by statute. I mean, there's some training that is required every year that is by WAC, and technically you're supposed to do it.
Well, you need to figure out which is which.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because I have a lot of training that's not going on in my office that's required by law to be able to do the job that we do. This is over and above that, and I have no,
Well, and we have some employees that are
It's
like
really
5 hours
squeezed.
a week maybe, and it costs me money to pay them to take the training that it's on a grant that I can't afford to pay them for.
Well,
So-
as I said, he'll bring it back around to the commission, we'll look at what there is for, what's mandatory, what's, required, and what's a decision that we've made to get it put into place. and-
The other piece on the badges, Frank, I don't know why the requirement is there, but we work very closely with all the school districts in a number of counties on this whole issue of having badges on. And I would tell you, I'm not gonna say it's gonna prevent anything, but recognizable for us in law enforcement, when we have to respond to so many different locations and different schools, it's been a huge thing nationwide as a best practice to have the badges and have them on for those that are in uniform. And it does make a difference when we have to walk into a building or into a school to know who's who in Hollywood. And I don't know that I would hold out not giving people identification badges because they haven't taken some test.
Right.
I think it would be much more prudent and much more, it'd be much more mindful of people's safety, of putting the safety of the individuals over some test. We know who they are, we know they're an employee, if we have them badged up, would be well worth our while if we had an emergency to come in. Most of you in the room, we know each other, but there are other county employees that when we come in, if something was to happen, and I'm trying to stir, but if you had an active shooter or something disturbance inside there, we're not gonna know everybody in every building, if it's a county building. And it's certainly nice to walk in and be able to match that name tag with that face and go, okay, this is a county employee. So I don't think I would forego taking a test to have the badges appropriately delivered to county employees. I think it'd be much more prudent to get that done and then work on the
I
testing.
think we need two machines, one for emergency management to
Yeah,
badge those
maybe.
people, and then
Yeah.
the county human resources
Right.
needs to have one separate. But you can walk over and get one right now.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, from what I understand, it's a requirement of that machine,
Right.
so
Right.
we may have to have
Grant
another
or something.
machine in order to do it, but we can't forego it, because then we're in violation there. But let's look at the options, see what those costs are. I wouldn't think it'd be that expensive,
I
but
want to bring up one more thing along those lines. So front counter staff, and it hasn't happened here yet, but my front counter staff, especially my nurses, did not want their last names on the front of their ID
That was
card
another requirement.
that's a good point.
because of stalking.
Yep.
I was told that they had to,
Yeah.
because I said my front staff, licensing, they take a lot of grief, and they said, you can clip it on, below your waist. But if you clip it, I can tell you, I lost mine on aisle 7 of Fred Meyer, and I haven't found it yet. But, if you clip it, it's like classes you lose. So if you don't wear it around your neck, you're gonna lose it. So a couple of them just flat out will not, because they have had situation where they know their last name and they will try to locate them, so.
Perhaps
I
it
have
can
a
be on the
big-
back
yeah.
of the badge instead of the front also, if we have to have it, but we'll look at all those as an option. Is there anything else on that?
We have to have our name on everything.
Okay, did you have anything further?
Just two quick things. Actually, just one. Within our budget department, I just want to let everybody know, Jessica resigned. She's moving on to work with the city of Olympia.
It's very sad.
Very sad.
Yeah, very, very sad. But Jennifer's on board, and we will be moving forward with putting another job application in the newspaper to rehire another financial analyst. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Corner?
Nothing.
The only thing I'll add is, it's obvious from the commission, we're at that time where we're starting to talk about budgets, and we're looking at doing something that's being done from the counties on both ends of us. So I guess mine is more of a request. We always seem to find a way to make things adversarial, but this is the process that already exists out there. Instead, if we run into pitfalls, let's try to work together to get through it so we can keep it moving and go forward, make sure we get everything turned in on time and all. But also like just kind of throw it out there that if we do it and we admit to each other where the money is financially, where we're sitting, if it's bad, we say it, we get the thing. It sure be nice to get that budget established in the end of October, beginning of November this year. Just my 2 cents. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? And other than that, next meeting is?
Could I say a few things for district court?
Sure.
Judge Meadows is out at a conference right now. She's not due back until the 6th, so I'm not sure she's gonna make it back in time for the budget advisory meeting, but I will be there to answer what questions I can answer. We're, like everybody else, holding our head just above water. We have that legal financial obligation bill that takes effect right now. House Bill 1783.
Thursday.
Pardon?
Thursday.
Just so you know, it will affect the revenues of district court, and I know you've been told that a million times, but I can't tell you when you're gonna start seeing that.
If I may add to that, in the numbers that we had this morning, we did put a WAG at that of $250,000 reduction this year and a potential $500,000 reduction for next year.
And that's a, throw your fishing pole out and see what you grab.
It's a guess.
It is, and so, but I just wanna make sure that you guys are all right there with us on that one and understanding it. Other than that, with the, and I won't speak for Amber down there, but I don't know what their trial schedule is like. We have many trials coming up this week and next week, and with the construction and everything going on here, just so you know, there's gonna be jurors going everywhere, FYI.
I'd like to add something with a request to what you're talking about there. For our budget, that is a huge thing. We're looking at, what we're talking this morning of a $750,000 hit from now till covering next year. If you find a process to where you can figure out what's happening, just to give us so we can have good early numbers, even anything you come up with, it should be appreciated because we're all going to be dependent on those numbers.
I will certainly try. I can tell you that from the Office of Public Defense, based on their numbers, and Peter can hopefully back me up on that one, about 80% of our caseload are indigent defendants. That's a huge number. And the bill is what affects the indigent defendants on not being able to impose. So that's kind of...
Yeah.
It's gonna make an even more dramatic impact on the public defense reimbursements, because those are basically going away.
So we're including 500K, including that as well?
No, not yet.
The public defender reimbursements are part of the LFOs that can impose. The problem is they only get imposed on what are now indigent defendants. And so the same standard that one uses to determine whether or not a public defender is appointed is the standard one uses to determine whether to impose LFOs or not. And that's the statute now. Legal
Legal
financial
financial
obligations.
So does the statute eliminate the ability to impose the fee? Or is it if they can pay, they can pay?
Currently, it's if they can pay, they can pay. The statute moving forward is going to be, it cannot be imposed if they can document their indigency. And their indigency is the exact same standard that's used to determine whether a public defender gets appointed. And so cases with public defender appointed are a good ballpark for cases that will not have LFOs imposed outside of restitution, which we don't see a time of anyways.
Anything further? Your Honor, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I think we're just as busy as everyone else. We have an increase in dependencies. The last numbers that came out showing last year showed that Mason County is much higher than any other county, thanks in part partly to cases. We're aware of that.
Yes.
And so those are very time-intensive cases. So we're busy.
Again, thank you everybody for coming. Next meeting, Monday, August 6th, 2 p.m. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.